Everyone has a gold mine. They just don't think it. They go, how do I create an interesting character? You don't need to. You're looking at him in the mirror or her in the mirror. You don't need to.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Jamin. This is Screenwriters Need to Hear This, the podcast. I'm here with my buddy Phil Hudson.
What's up? What up, guys?
What's up? It's been a while, so we're going to talk. It's been a while. So let's talk about some stuff. Today's episode is called Great Writing Exercise. This is a little exercise I put together, and I'm sure everyone has variations that are similar to this, but this is my spin on it. So it's my podcast, so you have to do what I say. So this is what this is the tip I give out for aspiring, not just for screenwriters, but any kind of writer. You know, if you're writing short stories or novelists, or it really doesn't matter, or teleplays. This is just something you should do even before you dig into writing your screenplays. Just do this for a little bit. And so this is what I say. So pick an emotional moment from your life, just like something small, something that elicits a strong emotional reaction when you think about it. And when I say small, it could be like the day your dog died, the last day of high school, and you have to say goodbye to people that you'll never see again. And when I say small, like people, what do you mean my dog dying is small? Well, it is small. I mean, it's not. It's just a little. It's a fragment of your life. It's just a moment in your life. It's not like it's not Indiana Jones. It's not your entire life. I think some people have this temptation to tell their life story. And don't tell your life story. Tell a story from your life. That's it. So pick up something small that elicits an emotional reaction when you think about that moment, and then write it. But don't write it as if just normally. I want you to write it as if this is somebody that you're not that person, right? It didn't happen to you. You are not that person. You have never been that person. And so I want you to write that story like that. But now write it as if you're gossiping about that person. Remember, it's not you. You're gossiping. Now, gossip is mean. It's judgmental. It's cruel. It's unfair. But it is entertaining. That's why people gossip. And so it could be funny, right? And it's harsh, and it's it's got a very very strong point of view. You always have, when you're gossiping about someone, you're taking it to an extreme. And then so start telling that story about yourself as if you're gossiping about yourself. And then when you get about halfway through, change gears a little bit, and then start telling the story as if you have just spent an hour with this person, with you, and you really got to know this person. And all your preconceived notions about them were wrong. And now you really know them. And then you're going to unfold that part. You're going to start telling all that detail. And that's about halfway through the story. And then if you can do that part where it's real and it's honest and you're digging deep because you know this person now, if you can do that, you're onto something great, because first of all, you're the only person who can tell that story, and it's intimate. And it's raw. I mean, you don't want to overshare, because oversharing is weird. But if you can do that, man, you can. Then you're ready to start writing, because, so many people. I'm not letting you talk, Phil. I'm just.
That's okay. I'm enjoying this. So continue.
If you can do that, you're telling a story that only you can talk. Oh, that only you can tell. Only you know that detail. And then, so many people. Then start doing it that way, because so many people want to invent a screenplay, right? They want to invent characters, and but that's fine. But you're really inventing a human being from whole cloth, and that's a lot. But if you tell that story from you, you don't have to invent a character. You're the character, and you don't have to come up with it. So when you any kind of screenplay or novel, so many young writers or new writers just want to jump into. They want to create a world, and I understand that. But when you do that, you have three giant tasks that you have to take a bite out of. You have to create characters. That's a lot of work. You have to come up with a story for those characters. That's a lot of work. Then you have to figure out how to unpack the details of that story, in what order, in order to tell an engaging story, how to unfold it, how to unfold all the information. But if you do this version, this writing exercise, you don't have to create the character, because you're the character. You don't have to come up with the story, because the story already happened to you. So now all you have to do is concentrate on one thing, which is unpacking that information. And that's plenty. That's a big enough job. Believe me, that's a big enough job, and that is basically a personal essay. And a personal essay is the gateway to whatever I feel is the gateway to becoming a really good writer.
Yeah, I think that there are several nuances in what you're doing there that I'd like to unpack because I think they touch on not only some high level writing practices that took me 6-7 years to be able to really even conceptualize, but you're also hitting on some of those basic things that most people are talking about that didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I always talk about the term write what you know. You hear that all the time in early writing, and that's the advice that most people don't want to do is write what you know. And when I was first starting out, I was a deli boy. I managed a couple delis. I worked in a call center. It was the height of the recession, 2008. And I was like, what is exciting about working in a call center? What is exciting about working at a deli? So it's like, what, do I make some convoluted fake world inside my deli? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. And I kind of equate it to when I was playing t-ball or baseball as a kid. The coaches would say, don't take your eye off the ball. Well, that never made a lot of sense to me either, right? What does that mean? What they mean to say is don't close your eyes, right? Because it totally messes up your hand-eye coordination if you can't visualize where the ball is coming. And to me, this is the same thing. It's hard to grasp, but you put it out there. Write what you know isn't necessarily you work at a restaurant, so write about a restaurant. It's really you have lived a very unique life. You've had very personal experiences, and there are details in those personal experiences that when told at that vulnerable level will resonate across all time with all people because of the specificity of it.
Right.
And to me, that's what write what you know is, and that's basically what you're describing.
Exactly. There is a woman when we're on staff of Tacoma FD. She's young new writer, and she was in the military for many years. I think she was the Air Force for many years. And I was like, oh, there's your pilot. Now you get to write about that. And she looked at me like, what do you mean? And I go, that's interesting. And she goes, nah, it's not as interesting as you think it is. I was working at she wasn't stationed anywhere. She was basically working in an office to serve, people in the Air Force. She was, working in the dentist's office. I go, but that's interesting. You're not in combat. You have this expectation that you're supposed to be dodging bullets, but you're not. You have this kind of very ordinary job. I go, that's interesting. The fact that there's this, duality. There's totally interesting stuff. No matter who you are, you just have to figure. You have two jobs though. You have to be brave enough to figure out what your problem is. Because the character, you're basically talking about yourself as if you're a character. You have to be brave enough to figure out what that character's problem is, right? And you have to be brave enough to share it. And so you got to do it. If that's your job, you're a writer. Not too bad. You signed up for it. That's what you got to do.
And we've talked about this on several episodes of the podcast, but it's that emotional vulnerability piece was the other piece that I couldn't get to as a young writer. I was so uncomfortable talking about the negative feelings and the negative emotions and looking at all of the what a quote unquote bad things that had happened in my life that I didn't even want to go there. And so all of my writing was flat. It wasn't very interesting. My characters were very passive. At least my protagonists were very passive. And interestingly enough, Tuesday night, we're recording this on a Thursday. Tuesday night, I hopped into a writers group from your course. It was a group of the people put together basically a reading room where you submit your pilot, you read the first act, people give notes on it, you read it out loud, you learn a lot. And Lori, who's great in our group, she was up, and the note I had for her was the same note. And I just had to own it. I said, look, your character feels very passive. And I'm very aware of that because my protagonists are very passive because it's almost like I'm trying to explore this world without having to make any decisions. And that's not an interesting thing to watch. Your protagonist should be making decisions, and that should get them into trouble or create conflict or put them in conflict. So they have to make those decisions. And it's a more engaging way to watch this. And it ultimately leads them to having to confront some of these problems and things that they don't want to confront, which, it takes me back to when I was in Ecuador doing these film workshops with the UDLA, which is a university down there. The person I was translating for, my buddy Rich, was like, you're going to see people's problems projected in their screenplays, and they're not even going to be aware of those problems. And it was really interesting to just kind of see These are people just sorting out their own problems on paper,
Yeah.
but unaware and unwilling to get to the real meat of that problem to figure it out.
We had, it's funny that we mentioned this, but we had Seaver and I, my partner, we had a meeting with a young writer over the week and potentially to supervise a project, a pilot. So these producers reached out to us, say, hey, are you supervise a project? And we're exploring it. We're not sure if we're going to do it or not, but we're both exploring it. And so she's pitching the idea of her pilot, which is loosely based on her life. Okay, right? And then as we're talking, so I hear the pitch, and then as I'm talking to her, I'm like, tell me a little more about you. Because it's not, the character is loosely based on her. I go, but I want to know about you. And and then she starts telling me the real version that happened to her life. Mm-hmm. And as she's telling me this, she's crying. She can't hold back the emotions. She starts crying. And I go to her, this is your pilot. This is your pilot. The real version, not the one you made up that you think belongs on TV, the one that's real. And she just like looked at me and she was like, you're like, yeah, I guess you're right. I'm like, yeah, of course I'm right, because you're crying. It's amazing. Everything you're saying is amazing. And so, I think people are afraid to go there, and that's the first step. Go there, Yeah.
Well, I believe it was that same writer who mentioned when we were talking about having to go there and get to that place. And I think you brought up, have you ever considered drama? And that same writer in that writer's room was like, oh, I'm too afraid to go there. I don't want to go there. And we've talked about that, I think, on another podcast too. But that emotional vulnerability, man, you got to crack that walnut open and you got to just spill your guts out.
Yeah, but you don't want to overshare. That's the hard line.
What's the line for those of us who are socially challenged, Michael? Like, what do we?
I have no idea.
What's that line?
I have no idea. I really don't know. That's such a like if you're making I think it's like if you make the audience too uncomfortable, it's like, whoa, you're telling me stuff that it's just a little too much, too fast, too soon, and I wish I could be, more helpful with that. But a good way to, give it to somebody if they don't want to finish reading your script, that might be one of the issues. It's like, it's a little too much. So you want to be truthful, but you don't want to, you got to think about your audience. You don't really want to make them uncomfortable,
Yeah. I think of Lars von Trier and the Dogma 95 movement. Are you familiar with that at all?
With what?
Lars von Trier. He's a director. In Dogma 95, and I'm probably going to butcher this, I studied it in film school. It's basically, you could only shoot what you could shoot with no cuts, use natural lighting, and this Dogma 95 film perspective was very, very prevalent, and it probably still is very prevalent in the Netherlands. And he wrote some films that were absolutely just shocking. One was called The Youth, and it made me leave the room within 15 minutes in my ethics class. Like, people they were going for shock factor, and I had to walk out because it was so uncomfortable. I couldn't understand what was going on. Someone's head was where the translations were for the subtitles. I was just watching. I thought some horrible things were happening that turned out weren't. But even in that, there's, and I apologize, I don't have it written down, but there was a film I watched with him, and it was basically unraveling all of the lies that his family had compacted. And it all did come spilling out at the end. And in that one, I made it all the way to the end, and I finished it, despite the fact they're still talking about some really heavy family abusal problems at their father's birthday celebration. They all came spilling out. I still made it through because of the way that the weight of that was unpackaged, right? It was laid out in a pace that was more tolerable than the other film.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what you're saying here is right. It's like, shock is a tool, and I think James Gunn, the director, he's even said he used to go for shock when he was first directing films and writing things, and now he understands that is a tool to be used to get a point across or to elicit an emotion. Shouldn't be the thing you're going for.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's there are so many writers. Even I was reading an article about this guy I went to college with. I didn't know him very well, but he was in my year in school, and Akhil Sharma, and he writes he's an author, and he's written this book, only a couple of books. This is how it works if you're like literature, and they've won awards, but these books aren't really read by that many people because it's so literature, but he's a fantastic writer. I've read some short stories that he wrote. Now, these were wonderful, and so he's terrific. But he writes about stories basically about his past growing up in India, and he's still trying to work through it. He's just still trying to work through it. And he wrote one book that won all sorts of awards and critical acclaim. And then I think it was like 20 or 30 years later, he needed to rewrite it. He realized that wasn't that fair to some of this is what he said. He wasn't fair to some of the characters. And the characters they were made up, loosely based on his life, but made up. But he felt that he was being unfair to them. And so he wanted another crack at his book to make it better. And I guess not many writers do that. And so it's like, here's the second version of my book and it's different. And he worked, for years on it. And then I guess the publishing deal he got on it was, okay, he found a publisher who would publish it for $0. And he did it anyway. I just want to get the right version out there for $0. And he works as a professor, I think at Rutgers, teaching, also graduate level, creative writing. He's a wonderful writer. But, it's just interesting. I thought I just had to get it out there. And like I said, it was loosely based on his life. So.
Hey, it's Michael Jamin. If you like my videos and you want me to email them to you for free, join my watch list. Every Friday, I send out my top 3 videos. These are for writers, actors, creative types. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you, and it's absolutely free. Just go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist.
Well, everything you're describing here, again, like the nuance of this process of taking something that, and in your notes, you actually say something that elicits a strong emotion.
Yeah.
And you said a small moment, but a strong emotional reaction. And this gossip perspective is really interesting because it forces you not to see it through your lens, but through the lens of other people. How would other people talk about this situation? Which is beautiful because it gives you some separation from something that might be too raw for you to explore.
Yeah, but also you might make it funny too, if that's what you want to do, because cruel is funny.
I love that. So this whole process I think is really interesting. Are there any other reasons why you think this personal essay process that you love? Is there anything else that you think, or any reason why you think this is a great approach to writers breaking through some of that discomfort of being vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, like the first and foremost is that tell your story, because you don't have to make it up. You can tell an amazingly rich, interesting story from yourself. I find small stories more interesting than giant adventures. Whatever, maybe just because I'm getting old, but by that I mean whatever, the Marvel movies or Pirates of the Caribbean 12 or whatever. To me, I like small character studies much more. But I understand not everybody wants to do that, but that's actually what I've spent a lot of time doing with, I know I talk about this quite a bit, but my book, A Paper Orchestra, is that's what it is. It's a collection of personal essays, but it's not written. I'm the hero of it. I'm the main character, but I'm writing it not like as if I'm someone of note. I'm writing it as if I'm a character in my own life. Mm-hmm. So I'm commenting, like I said, sometimes it's gossipy. If I'm talking about, if I do a story about 8-year-old me that happened as a child, I got a strong point of view on that, about that little nerdy little kid. And so I'm being a little mean to him, which is fun, and so that's the subject. Of course, if you're listening to this in time and you're in the LA area, we're doing a staged reading basically a heightened performance of some of the stories in my book. And for details, you can go to, if you've listened to this on time, it's going to be played the first 3 weekends in August. So hopefully you hear it.
2022, to be clear.
2020, yes, of 2022 at the Atwater Playhouse. And for tickets, go to michaeljamin.com/staged readings. And there's 6 performances, and we follow it with a Q&A. I'm hoping, I know a lot of people are going to be there, and I'm hoping people ask me. I mean, the show is for everybody, but I'm hoping there are enough writers or aspiring writers there who will ask me, "Oh, tell me about how you got here in this piece. Tell me where," because it's all true, but it's not like I started when I told these stories. It's not like I just pulled them I'll just tell the story about the time I did whatever. It's like, it doesn't really work that way. It's like, for example, I told one of the stories is about how I took judo lessons as a kid. Okay, so that's all I really remember. I mean, that was the genesis of it. I'll tell a story about when I took judo lessons, but then as I think about it, as I put it together, then the story unfolds. So it's not like something I just plugged in. I just put this off the shelf and typed it up. It's really more about like figuring out how to what that time in my life, that few couple months was really about. And so I don't know. I find that. I find that really interesting. Way more so than like sometimes you read like biopics. I'm not a fan of biopics because then you're telling the character's entire life story, and it's like, okay, I get it. Thomas Jefferson from birth to death. Okay, that's fine. But if you could tell a small story from someone's life, that to me is like you're picking that whatever, just that small little moment. That then you can really craft it and make it almost a little more. Writerly, a little more literal, a little more like literature, I think. So,
yeah. Well, I think it's all beautiful, and I think that you give away a sample of these stories as well. michaeljamin.com/story, I think.
Yeah,
where people can go get a sample of an essay, and then you have this great segment in the course where you talk about writing personal essays, and I thought it was very interesting too. I was surprised that many people say that's one of the best segments in the course because of what you're talking about. It's almost like it separates you from the identity of being a writer and having to be a screenwriter, and you get out of the format that we're stuck in, and it allows people to see how you use story structure in another format and how it bridges the gap. Story is story, but how to again pull these moments and these details out of your life to be a bit more vulnerable than one would normally be.
Yeah, and it's meant to be inspiring because everyone has a gold mine. They just don't think it. They go, how do I create an interesting character? You don't need to. You're looking at him in the mirror or her in the mirror. You don't need to. So, I hope that's awesome. I hope that's inspiring. Hope people come and get a lot out of that.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Well, I have a little thing here I thought we might talk into because I think it goes right along with this. This is my notebook from film school and from my times translated for the Sundance Labs, and I've talked about it on the course. So this process of being vulnerable and how do we be vulnerable, and I've talked briefly about that process, but I thought it might be interesting or helpful to people to kind of see what that process actually looks like. And so what I have here is like I helped translate for Candela, the writer director of that film is out going to film festivals right now, but that was a really interesting adaptation in the Dominican, and the same thing, like he's already written the screenplay, he's been accepted into a bunch of fellowships, he comes into the Sundance Labs, and they put him through this exact same process, I got to do in film school. And again, for those, I understand, I apologize, Michael, for those of you who hate the fact that I bring up the fact that I was a Redford Scholar and went to Sundance, just keep in mind there are people who are listening to this, and obviously we know who Michael is, but who's this dude on the other side of the camera? I'm just a dude like you who happen to have had specific experiences that give me a different perspective on writing than most people get to have. That's why we're bringing it up. And some people don't know that. They don't know who I am. So as I mentioned in the Sundance workshop, this is from February 13th, 2016. And it's basically what you do is we wrote down 5 names of people. And then we did bullet point bio. And then basically we were handed a photo. And it was a photo of like a truck. And the question was, who owns this truck? And then I had to take and write down a bullet point list of who this person is, right? It's a refugee. They're here for political asylum. They were chased out for being an educated woman. They received death threats. They fled the country. They live in a home with other liberated Saudi women. And like I'm going down this line. And then the next exercise is what stood out from these things. Like what are things that stood out to me from this experience? And I had to write them down. Like I grabbed
What do you mean what stood out?
Five or six bullet points that stood out to me from that bullet point bio.
It was
15
from the
minutes.
Exercise about?
Yeah, so the exercise is 15 minutes of just bullet pointing a biography for a person based on a photo I saw, right? And it's just a random photo that the instructor.
So you're just saying, what are the top 5 moments that you listed, you're saying?
Yeah, what are the 5 things, characteristics about this person that stood out to me? And then the next thing that I had to do was I had to write down some answers to some questions, right? 3 things I never thought I would ever do. and everyone in the room has to write these down, and then we share them. And then 3 times you told something important to a stranger. 3 things that I consider to be provocative, and 3 things that excite me. And I had to write these things down, and I read them out loud to this group. And so it's a bit embarrassing. I'm having to divulge this information. Some of these are secrets I thought I'd take to my death. Mm-hmm. And then the instructor, Joan, would basically hit on one. And I think from my observation after doing this many times, it was the one that she noticed we were the most uncomfortable with, or the one that we felt the most, we were afraid to share, if that makes sense. Like there was some emotional weight to that. And so we grabbed one bullet point from each of these that we were assigned to, and then we had to write a story in a matter of 15 minutes. And it was literally a personal narrative from the perspective of this person, embedding those stories as if they were had happened to the person in the story.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so what this did and what it taught me is it makes the writing that much better, because it's not all just figment of imagination stuff you're putting out and pulling out of the blue sky. You're putting these real personal experiences in the story. And as we've said, that's what stands out to people. That's the thing that you grab onto.
I think some people, new writers, are worried that, but then I'm not inventing, then I'm not creating. If I steal from myself, then it's not what I want to do, which is invent from whole cloth, right? But here's the thing, Nick, no one knows. No one's going to know that you didn't make that up. No one's going to know that you stole that from your own life. No one's going to know. And so you don't have to worry about, well, I'm not doing my job. You're doing your job. Your job is to entertain somebody with a story. Mm-hmm. That's it. You don't have to make it up,
Right. Well, I think that kind of speaks to the thought that popped in my head as you were saying that was, it is much braver to put out bad writing than it is to put out good writing. And this is going to make your writing better.
Yeah.
And so it's actually it shouldn't be as scary. It's like the antithesis here. You think it's brave to put this stuff out there, but actually it's not as scary or brave as putting out bad writing and have someone reject you because what you wrote was crap.
That's exactly right. That was a story I told from a friend of mine, who I told her I was performing a paper orchestra, my collection of personal essays, and because the last 2 shows are going to be the most difficult for me in terms to perform in terms of because they really emotionally they're probably difficult for me to read. And she goes, "Oh, you're so brave." I go, I'd be more brave if I had put something crappy out there, because then people will look at me like, this guy sucks. So they're not going to look at me this guy. At least they'll think I'm a good writer. They may think, it may be difficult for you emotionally to share, but at least they'll think I'm a good writer, which is what I want.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, if it's okay, let me go through a couple more of the questions as kind of prompts for anyone who wants to kind of dig deep here. 3 times you were embarrassed by your mother's behavior. Mm-hmm. 3 times you found an object that you thought you had lost. 3 times you had an experience regarding race. And then again, same thing. You write these biographies you go through. 3 times you could not let go. 3 political situations that infuriate you. Mm-hmm. 3 times you were confronted by something big. Let's see. 3 times you had personal complications. 3 times you had something taken away from you.
Okay.
3 religious experiences. 3 times you felt locked up. 3 times you could have helped but didn't. Your favorite your favorite childhood experiences. 3 of them.
Yeah, 3 times you didn't help when you could have. I like that one a lot. That's a good one. So what do you do with? What's the next step in this exercise?
Yeah, so I think the exercise would be you going back to something you said you do, which is pull up a magazine, pull up a news site, just flip through until you find a random photo, and then ask yourself the question: who lives here? Who owns this? Right? 1 photo was a truck. 1 photo was a small house. 1 photo was a pair of glasses with the tags on in an empty parking lot, and the glasses were broken. But they were brand new glasses, right? And so you put it down, and then you grab 3 of these questions, write down those experiences, give yourself 15 minutes to do it, and then pick the one that makes you most uncomfortable from each of these, knowing you don't have to share this writing with anyone. No one's read these stories outside of that room. I had to read them out loud, which was super embarrassing, but very good for me to get through this. And then give yourself 15, 20 minutes to write yourself that monologue and see and feel how much more powerful that writing is when you put yourself in the story.
Yeah.
And I'll also say that Joan, who leads these workshops, she'd often say, people always message me and say, hey, can I get more questions? Can I get more questions for my exercise? And she's like, I just make them up. You can do it at any moment. You can just think about, what are 3 things most people don't want to talk about? What are 3 difficult experiences people are going through?
But you see what the connection is? I was saying, find a moment that it has lists an emotional reaction, and all those questions do. Name 3 things. Name a time that you could have helped when you didn't. That's shame.
Yeah.
So it's the same. It's similar. You're just coming approaching it from a different angle. So
yeah, absolutely. It's just an exercise to get this stuff out in the open, and then I think it gives you that chance to see how your writing actually improves when you put yourself on the page.
Yeah. So that's great.
So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, you guys got a lot of work to do now.
Yeah, go get after it.
Get after it. If you're driving your car, pull over and start writing. All right, that's it, right? That's good? That's interesting.
I think
Phil?
so. I mean, I would encourage everyone else, if they have their own writing exercises that they feel help them get through this, leave them in the comments. If you're watching this on Michael's site, great. If you're watching on YouTube, great. If you're listening to it in a podcast, go write it on Michael's Instagram post or shoot it over an email, whatever it is. I think that there's other people probably have some similar experiences or opportunities to put the stuff out there. And
we could share it in the future. We could collect everyone's ideas. We could do another episode on great ideas we've gathered from our listeners. That would be interesting. Talk about that.
I think so. And we could do so. That'd be fun.
Yeah. So you could email them to support@michaeljamin.com. And that's one way to do it. All right, everyone. Well, that was interesting. Real fast. If you're in LA, the first 3 weekends of August, and you want to come see my show, A Paper Orchestra, tickets are still available at michaeljamin.com/staged events. I'll see you there. There'll be a Q&A afterwards.
Staged-readings, isn't it?
Oh, shoot.
But you can go to michaeljamin.com. It's right on the bottom of the page. You get your
Phil
tickets.
is right. Phil is right.
You got it right the first time. It's staged-readings, I think.
Staged-readings. That was a different thing. Sorry. That's why I have Phil. Phil holds my hand and corrects me. That's okay, right. Everyone. Thanks so much, and be well.
See you later. This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.